Sehr geehrter
Mr. President, Martin Schulz, President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, colleagues from the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. In November 1989, a French President and a German Federal Chancellor spoke together for the last time in the European Parliament. François Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl, just after the fall of the Berlin Wall, met in Strasbourg and took the floor. Both of them felt what a time of upheaval it was for Germany and for Europe, and both of them showed that they were deeply moved by those events. And they both of them recognized, with the clear words they uttered on that occasion, the fact that there were joint European responsibilities to be borne, that Germany would grow together, and that ultimately would lead to a growing together of Europe. And today, it is with great gratitude that we can think back to those historic moments when we Europeans, in the wake of the first coming together of that part of the continent, stepped up to the mark, and we now have a free Europe and peaceful Europe. That seems to go without saying, but it did take an awful lot of effort back when. There were fears, there was skepticism in the old member states, not least that the number of member states of the European Union would be likely to double, almost. Many people thought that the freedom of movement of millions of new European citizens would be a threat to their own job. New decision-making structures had to be devised. European funds had to be redirected to the benefit of the new member states. And today, we recognize that all the effort that went into that back then has paid us all back. It has not brought us lower, it has built us up and has contributed not to less freedom, but to more freedom. It hasn't cut down on diversity, it has added to diversity.
Kurz, Sie haben
In brief, it has helped us along the way to more Europe, because we have learned, we Europeans, from our history and from our diversity, that we need to master the situation, and the capabilities that have put us in a position to take up the responsibility for freedom is ultimately tolerance, which is a valuable commodity. The old differences between East and West have turned out to be a great moment in history, and it showed that if we demonstrate courage and if we demonstrate the will, we can do it, and that there is absolutely no reason at all to step back and to feel discouraged in these times. In a word, it showed us and shows us what is possible. You had, after that, to draw up the Lisbon Treaty and the Fundamental Charter, and then we've seen that altogether we are able to pull ourselves through the economic crisis, and that we are stronger together than we are separate. And the European state debt crisis is one in which we acted together, and François Hollande referred to the very difficult negotiations. But the very fact that we did this together meant that we were able to guarantee the unity of the Eurozone.
Meine Damen und Herren,
Ladies and gentlemen, the French President François Hollande and I are able to speak to you today, and we are grateful for that invitation. We are speaking in a time when, once again, Europe faces enormous challenges. And I put it to you that this is a trial of historic measure. There are very many people indeed who are taking the arduous and dangerous routes into Europe across the Mediterranean via Italy, the Aegean, through Greece, etc. And people that are fleeing terrible civil war, particularly the war in Syria, which has already cost more than 250,000 lives, and more than 10 million people have had to flee and become refugees. There are refugees from Iraq, refugees from the unstable situation in Libya and parts of Africa, and they've all had to face the fact that our diplomatic negotiations and all the transatlantic arrangements haven't brought about peace in Syria yet. We have not been able to prevent the conflict in Syria. We didn't manage to plug the vacuum in Libya. These are people who should have the possibility of living without fear of bombs and in peace in their own countries. And that is a job for Europe, and ultimately it's a job for the whole world. And this is the message, I think, for today. A decisive contribution is required. A fight against war, political, military persecutions, a loss of hope, poverty. Germany and France, with that resolve, have helped in the conflict in Ukraine to negotiate a solution with the destabilization of East Ukraine, and we have fortunately in Europe managed to act together. We have imposed sanctions together, and we have said, going to allow our principles to be ridden roughshod over. But we are at work on trying to solve these conflicts, and we use the Normandy format, and last Friday we held talks in Paris, in France, and they give us hope at least that the ceasefire may hold and that the elections in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions may be held. But this is just one of many conflicts, ladies and gentlemen, and I know that our foreign security policy must continue to try to solve conflicts and to stop the causes for people having to flee. We will have to put much more money forward for this than we have hitherto, and the decisions that are required to bring that about need to be made swiftly. All of this is going to change Europe once again, just as happened after the changes of 25 years ago in Europe. And of course, with an improvement in our competitiveness, that is an issue we have to get to grips with. The digitalization of our society too, sustainability of development, a common energy policy, free trade agreements with other parts of the world that share our principles, and right now a strong economic Europe which exploits the value of the single market is needed more than ever before, and our economic policy coordination for the Eurozone is required more than before, and then we need to try and sort out some of the conceptual errors that we had at the heart of that, and Germany and France will play their part in doing that. The great number of refugees is changing the agenda in Europe, and it is going to do so ever more and increasingly so, because it is a matter of our interests in Europe and our place in the world which is being challenged, and we have to try to help stop the flow of migrants, and there's no way around ensuring that the causes of fleeing can be stemmed, and obviously people will flee, that goes without saying, but in these months in Europe we are seeing that global events have involved us very closely, and that happens whether we like it or not. We cannot shut ourselves off from the world and what happens in it. Never before since the Second World War have so many people been fleeing, more than 60 million, and I think that figure alone shows quite what the size of the issue is. Nobody easily or voluntarily just leaves their place of birth, their Heimat, the place they came from. But we have also to say to these people that they cannot stay here, and we need to make sure that the people that require our protection against war and persecution are in receipt of that help. And we need a political process to bring about a sorting out of the problems in Syria with all of the international operators and a greater role for Europe in all of that. Syria's neighbours need to help, and there need to be prospects for the millions of refugees. Europe has acted. The European Commission has made proposals to improve the financial arrangements, and I thank the European Parliament for supporting that, and the Member States must also do their bit. Turkey plays a key role. Turkey is our immediate neighbour. It is the starting point for irregular migration. And they have been doing extraordinary things for more than 2 million refugees, but they need our strong support when it comes to the accommodating of and helping of refugees and in the fight against traffickers. This is political dialogue that the Commission has started with Turkey, and it is of such enormous importance for that very reason, and Germany is going to provide bilateral support to the Commission in that. And all the efforts to try and form a unity government in Libya is one that Europe supports. The whole of the European Union, when it comes to dealing with these issues, is going to pull together, because we mustn't fall prey to a inclination to want to act nationally in these moments. We must, to the contrary, act together. It is precisely now that we need more Europe. We need, more than ever before, the cohesion and courage that Europe has always shown in the past when it really mattered. And Germany and France are standing ready. And we agree with the President of the European Commission, who has put many important proposals on the table that we must now set about implementing. We agree with the President of the European Council, who has worked intensively to help improve cooperation with countries of origin and transit. And we agree with the European Parliament in its resolution of the 10th of September, in which they reminded us that it is not possible to deal with the refugee crisis by people or countries going on their own, and we are thankful to you, Mr. President of the European Parliament, for making these decisions possibly so swiftly. It is only if we work together that Europe will succeed to bring down the worldwide causes of people having to flee and becoming refugees, that we will be able to fight traffickers, that we will be able to set up hotspots that will better protect the external borders of the European Union, that we will get no risks to the internal, the reduction or the abolition of internal borders in Europe. And if we help our neighbours to deal with the issues that are right on our doorstep, then that will help bring that about.
Und meine Damen und Herren,
it is only together, ladies and gentlemen, that we will be able to have the return agreement brought about. It gives prospects to people who will one day return home. It is only by having a fair distribution or relocation of refugees around Europe that we can deal with this issue. We have to be frank. The Dublin procedure in its current form is obsolete in practice. It was well thought through back when, no doubt about it, but when it has faced the challenges of our current situation on our external borders, it has not proven itself viable. And this is why we need a new approach based on fairness and solidarity in the relocation of refugees. And I welcome the work of the European Commission on that. And I think it is a good thing that Germany and France are of one mind on that. And equally, it will only be possible for us to tackle the huge efforts to integrate refugees that it's only if we do that together that will be possible. We have many people coming here and who will be wishing to integrate into our societies, and it means that we have to uphold existing rules, and it does mean that people will have to learn the particular language. But we also have a duty to stand by those people who come here in dire need, to see them as people and not just an anonymous mass of people, quite irrespective of the fact that whether they may have a prospect to remain or not. And it is exactly for that reason that humanitarian minimum standards must be upheld for accommodation of refugees and the processing of asylum applications. We owe that to ourselves, to refugees, and we are a community of values, we are a community of law, and we must orientate ourselves to those values that were established and set down in the European treaties: human dignity, tolerance, the respect of human rights and solidarity. And all of that means that these challenges cannot be borne by one or two member states alone, but by everybody all together. We have to face the fact that even if it is tempting to wish to shut ourselves off from all of this, we will know that people will come to harm on our borders, and it will serve nobody's interests. It certainly won't help those affected. They will still try and find ways in order to reach Europe, and it will not serve us in Europe. Shutting ourselves off in the time of the internet is illusory. It will serve nobody's interest, but we will have to face up to this very grave problems, because it is our values that bind us together, and if we don't bear in mind our identity and our values, we will lose them, and then we will betray ourselves. It comes down to no more and no less than self-betrayal.
Wenn wir das beachten,
If we heed that, then we will stand this historic test, and we will emerge from the crisis stronger than we entered into it. Then we will manage to express our values globally, and that furthermore will be something that the rest of the world will expect of us in any case. Ladies and gentlemen, the reasons why people leave their countries we are familiar with from our own European history. We know those reasons all too well. It was the case that for hundreds of years people were leaving Europe, not trying to get here, and Jean-Claude Juncker in his State of the Union address said that in such an impressive manner. Europe is now a place where many people from throughout the world come to try and achieve their hopes and escape their fears. It is a place that gives rise to people's dreams, and many people in Central and Eastern Europe were dreaming of a free and unified Germany all those years ago. And we have to be responsible when we think about the power of attraction of Europe, and that means that we have to take greater care of those that are currently in dire need in our neighbouring countries, and we have responsibilities both here and abroad, and if we face up to those, then we will stand the test that we face, and we will come out of it well, and we will also see that the opportunities here are greater than the risks. We will have to do an awful lot more work to convince people of the value of Europe, and I hope that after hundreds of years of hatred and wars between our people, President François Hollande, that we will now show that we can fight together for the same objectives.
und ich lade Sie alle.
And I would like to invite all of you here to join with us in doing that work of convincing people of the value of it. Every single member of this House will play an important role back home, back in your constituencies, in fact, in the full face of all European voters. But back in 1989, Helmut Kohl in the European Parliament was thinking about the upheavals in Central and Eastern Europe, and I quote, "But with cleverness and with moderation and flexibility, we will achieve it." Thank you very much.